Hi, it's Tom here from Running Physio in our usual Friday slot to talk to you about running injury and some of the latest evidence. A little bit later than normal, and that's because I've been juggling homeschooling and working, and I can tell you mixing homeschooling and dry January together is not a good combination. I don't recommend that at all. I'm sure lots of you have been in a similar boat at the moment. But I wanted to talk to you tonight about some new research that's come out that's actually getting some attention around the role of foot core training and whether it might actually reduce risk of running injury. Now, of course, we mainly treat lots of running injuries, but if we can find ways of reducing running injury risk, then that's always going to be a bonus, really. So when a study comes out like this, it always grabs our attention, and it's worth exploring it and finding out a little bit more about it. So this study is Taddy et al. That's been published recently. I've put a link to it in the content below in the headline there. We've also got a link to our free webinar series on Achilles tendinopathy, lower back pain, and also lateral hip pain. So do check those out as well. And what this study did is they took 118 runners and they randomly allocated them into one of two groups. So into an intervention group which had this foot core training. Now, foot core training is largely centered around strengthening the foot and ankle, particularly the intrinsic muscles within the foot and ankle. And they had quite a selection of different exercises to do that. So let's show you some of these exercise options that they included. So there's a bit of self-massage and manipulation that you can see included there, but also things like plantar arch raises, squeezing a ball with the foot, trying to ab and adduct the toes, and some basic lower level calf stuff like sort of 2-foot calf raises, and some TheraBand work in there as well. Quite a selection of different exercises that they used. They had this 8-week foot core strengthening training course that was then followed by remote sessions. So a mixture of sort of self-work and supervised work for people to do as well. And you can see that the majority of these are fairly low level. This is not kind of heavy resistance training like we might see in other studies. So this approach then, using these foot core exercises, was compared to a control group where they did a selection of fairly sort of standard stretches. And the results are quite intriguing because the main result that they found was that runners in the control group that just did the stretches were 2.4 times more likely to develop an injury than the foot core training group. So it would appear that these relatively low-level exercises designed to strengthen around the foot and the ankle and develop this so-called sort of foot core does appear to be effective in reducing running injury risk. There was also another finding in here that I wanted to share with you that I thought was quite interesting, that they also reported that the stronger the foot, the longer it took the runner to develop an injury. Now, this really fits my biases because personally, I think that strength is important in runners. I think it's important in preventing injury. It's important that we address it in treating injury, and improving strength may actually improve economy and running performance as well. So when a study like this seems to find a connection between strength and injury development, it sort of ticks a lot of boxes for me. So it's an interesting study. It does seem to suggest there may possibly be a role for foot core training. There's a reasonable amount of numbers here. We're looking at nearly 120 runners in this study, so quite a decent sized study. And actually, on the whole, I think it's got a decent methodology as well. There are always limitations to be aware of. I think particularly in research, we don't want to just jump on the headline finding here. Overall, the number of injuries was quite low, just 28 altogether. So relatively small differences in injury numbers can have a big impact on results. I believe 20 of those injuries were within the control group and just 8 within the intervention group who did the foot core training. Injuries were self-reported, which always adds a little bit of unreliability to it because we're having to rely upon the runner to report their injuries. There was also more on-site interaction for those runners in the intervention group. They got more one-to-one care from the physio, which on its own may actually have an influence on results. And also, they recommend in this study that you need 4 to 8 months probably of this strength training, this foot core strength training to get the results. It's quite a long time. It's quite a complex program. It's potentially quite a time-consuming program in order to get that small injury reduction. So I would just wonder, is the juice worth the squeeze with this approach? Could we get similar results with a smaller program with a more manageable selection of exercises? Could we perhaps spend the time that we're spending doing these sort of exercises targeting smaller muscles within the foot, maybe targeting bigger muscles, looking at strengthening up the calf more? Because remember, if you look at these exercises, they don't seem to really progress onto loaded single leg calf work, for example. Could we spend the time looking at strength and conditioning to hit the quads, the hamstrings, the glutes, etc., and actually get better results that may have a more of an influence on things like running economy and performance? So I think it's an interesting study. The results support the idea perhaps of looking at strengthening around the foot and the ankle, but it's not the end of the story. We need more studies to follow this up, and we're really crying out for high quality studies like this one that actually really delve into strength and conditioning in runners and look at really what we would consider to be strength and conditioning. So heavier loads, progressive strength and conditioning that maybe includes power exercises as well, and to look at whether they can reduce injury risk, because we have surprisingly few studies that have done that have actually really studied a true strength training intervention. Okay, thanks very much everyone for listening. As ever, I look forward to your questions and comments. As I said, I've added a link to this study in the heading of this video. There's also a link to our free webinars. Do check those out. These videos are for you, so if you have any particular questions, any topics that you'd like us to cover, we had a comment on the last video that someone wanted us to talk about back pain in runners. One of our webinars is devoted to that, so do click on the link that I've shared in the headline if you'd like to find out more about that. So I look forward to your questions and comments, and we'll speak again very soon. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.